My name is Lisa Shea, and today we're going to pay homage to the Spaightwood Gallery in Upton. The Spaightwood Gallery at one time was a beautiful church, and fortunately it was saved from probably destruction, one would have to guess. It was a Unitarian church, and it's right on Main Street, and it is now the home of Spaightwood Galleries, which has all sorts of amazing historic prints, and there's even stained glass windows in there too, if you like stained glass windows. So if you're able to swing by and see them in person, they've got wide varieties of styles of prints, and some of them are realistic, and some of them are quite abstract, some are portraits. But what we're going to focus on is that one of the artists that they feature in there is Jim Dine. And Jim Dine was a very well-known pop artist, and he was best known for his hearts. And they've got some of his hearts in there so that you can see them. And in Jim's case, his hearts represented his wife and how much he loved his wife. Most of us know of hearts as being a fairly universal symbol of love and affection and compassion. So it's a fun thing to paint. And the nice thing about hearts is that each of us can paint our own style of what we think a heart should look like and what it represents to us, and it becomes a very personal thing. So I thought we'd paint some hearts today in celebration of Jim Dine and in celebration of the Spaightwood Galleries, which lets us see these kinds of famous pieces of art right up close and personal, because it's one thing to see these on the web and to look at them as a computer monitored image, but it's really another to see it in person and to see the textures of the paints and to see exactly what the artist was meaning to do. Alright, so what is a heart shape? A heart shape isn't like an actual human heart, because actual human parts have all sorts of valves and other things in them. So for whatever reason, a heart in artistic form was conceptualized to just be an object that has two curved tops. I'm just sharpening my pencil. It's good to have a sharp pencil when you're drawing. Alright. So a heart was conceptualized to have curved lobes at the top. Usually two. And then a swoopy part. But, as I imagine you've seen over the years, different artists have used hearts of different styles, and that's part of the fun of them. Some people do hearts that are, wide and fat. Some artists do hearts that are tall and skinny and small. So there's all sorts of heart shapes. Sort of like that. And my hearts don't tend to be symmetrical, but I'm happy with that because I like the sense that these are handmade and not just kicked out by a computer. You could have a computer program that said, alright, do two arches that are half circles, and then add a line which is at a 45-degree angle. Now, a computer could kick out hearts, but it's different if you're drawing your own heart and you're making it personal to you. So have fun making whatever types of hearts are meaningful to you. If you look at the Jim Dine hearts, he did a number of different kinds of styles. He tended to do sort of what we'll call a bubble heart. So there was sort of a deep part in the center there, and then he tended to come to a point. So deepish part. So that was sort of the Jim Dine style of heart. But he would do all sorts of textures and shading, and sometimes he'd give a little shading to give it a 3D look, that sort of thing. But what his heart was meant something to him. What kind of a heart would you draw to mean something to you? Sometimes people put arrows through the heart to indicate Cupid has struck your heart and caused you to fall in love with someone. Although, you know, that's sort of odd if we think of a heart as a symbol of love, that you have a giant arrow sticking through it and that this is a good thing. You would think if you saw a deer with a giant arrow sticking through it, that would probably be considered a not so good thing. But it all comes with the mythology of love and romance and how we look at it, that you are struck fatally by an arrow and that this is the way that you become romantically interested in someone else. Alright, so we are just playing with hearts today. Try different hearts. Part of creativity is trying different things. Do you like hearts that have a deep bottom area? Do you like hearts that have big, swoopy top areas? If you're going to do pen with your hearts, make sure it's a waterproof pen, because you don't want your pen to smear when you're adding watercolors. You don't have to use pen, you can just go right with the pencil. I'm going to try some pen just to see what this is like. You can just go with pencil, or you could do hearts just with watercolor or acrylics or whatever else you've got. Crayons. This pen looks like it's running a little low. It'll be time to get a new pen at some point. It still has ink in it though. What does a heart mean to you? And think about hearts for different people. When you think about drawing a heart for one family member, is it a different kind of heart than you would draw for another kind of family member? It's all about exploring. Exploring and creativity and thinking about symbols. So many artists out there like Dali and so on built a variety of symbols into their artwork. And often it started in a piece of art with one type of symbol, and then as they went on with their careers and tried new things, the types of symbols they used grew and changed. And if they kept using a certain symbol, the way that the symbol was used often changed. So right now we are just playing. We're just exploring ideas. Now I've got a bunch of different pinks here. I'm working on a project for a niece, and she wanted a pink fish. And I've got, as you see, a range of reds. But even when I made the reds light, they were not the kind of pink that I figured that she was probably after. So I got a number of different types of pinks here to play with. And we can do that as part of these heart exploration. Alright. Let's try to... So, colors I've got here, 3 of these are Artist Loft colors, and 1 of them is a Winsor Newton. So we'll see how each of these do. Right, the first one is a pearlescent red, and that's actually the red here. Now it says pearlescent red, but it's actually more as a pink, as you can see. I got this as part of a metallic set that came with gold, silver, copper, pink, blue, and white, all shimmery, and the shimmers are really pretty. So I did a separate video about how those work, but the colors are quite lovely. Here, we'll use a little brush. Normally I use a bigger brush, but we're making little hearts today. So, and if you're new to watercolors, watercolors dry and then get rehydrated right again with no problem at all. So I stuck some colors into this extra little palette here to play with them. They dried out, and that is fine. You just wet them and then they come right back to life. So this is a pearlescent. They call it a red, but it's actually a pink. And it has a shimmering to it, which is really pretty. Right? So I'm putting some of the pearlescent red into there. And putting a little extra bit where I think the shadows might fall naturally in a heart. So it's a pretty color. It's pretty and it's pink, but see, now this is where you get into the individual artist desires and the way that you look at things. I'm looking for a pink, but I'm not looking for a rose type of pink. I'm looking for, you know, a bright pink. And I would have said bubblegum pink, but then when you look at the paints that are out there, bubblegum pink even tends to be sort of muted. And I'm looking for, I guess, a hot pink is more what I'm going to say. So this is called a permanent pink here. Again, from Artist Loft. So I'll put a little of that over here. Here, I'll move my brushes so they aren't casting a shadow. But now that looks a little more darker slash purpler than I was hoping for. We'll give it a shot. Is this how you marry things? Alright, so we got permanent pink from Artist Loft. Yeah, see, that's more of like a purple, I would say. It's also worth mentioning that depending on how light or dark you put something down on the paper, it'll change the amount of paper that shines through it. So it'll change how bright or light it is, which also changes the nature of the color of it. The way white interacts with colors can have an effect on how the human eye perceives them. So this is a really pretty color. I do like this color a lot. Part of the benefit of doing something like this where you have little grids is if you find that you're not using a particular color a lot, like let's say that I'm rarely ever using this particular red, and then I find that I really like this pink, then I can just empty that out and then put the new color in there that I want, and now we just update my color chart. And let me show you what the color chart looks like for this. So this is the color chart for this pan slash tin. And all I did was take a big piece of watercolor paper, mark it off in grids, and then mark off the different colors that I'm using so that I can keep track of what they look like when they're dry on paper, because often what they look like when they're little dried lumps is a bit different than what they look like on a piece of watercolor paper. And I also tried to shade them from a little heavier to a little lighter so that I can get a sense of the range of colors that a given watercolor will make. But you can see none of these are like really a hot pink. A bunch of them are more solidly red or red-orange, and some of them are more red-purple, but none of them are the fishy color that I was looking for right now for my niece. Alright. Put that back. Alright, so we've tried the pearlescent one, and we've tried the permanent pink, which as mentioned I think is a really pretty color, so I may be taking out one of these other colors at some point to be able to use that more often. But neither of them is the vibrant pink that I was looking for the fish. So now we've got rose madder, alizarin. Rose madder, alizarin. Alright, so let's see what this is like. I have a feeling that this is going to be a little purpler than I was hoping for. But it's good to experiment. It's also worth noting that usually you can mix colors. So if I wanted to make an orange fish, and for some reason this is not closing properly. There we go, I think we got the threads reasonably on that side. If you have a red and a blue, and you want to make a purple, then you can just mix the red and the blue together and end up with a purple. So in many cases, you can mix the color that you're after, but there are some colors that don't really mix well, and hot pink seems to be one of those, because I tried all sorts of things with my other colors that I've got here, and I could not make a hot pink out of them. So it seemed like something, since it was a special project for my niece, kitten. I don't want you to go nuzzling the phone. The whole reason it's up in its little case is so that it does not get nuzzled. Although I suppose now that it's up on the clamp system, it is far less likely to get really pushed and knocked over from the cat, which used to be the problem that we had here all the time. Alright, so this is the Rose Madder Alizarin from Artist's Loft. And again, it's a lovely color. I like that a lot. But it is not the hot pink that I was looking for. I suppose I could do a whole series of pink fish for her and see which kinds of fish she likes the best. Now the cat's sitting right between me and my heart so that she can chew the end of my brush. You're a very good kitty. Yes, you are. Kitty, we are painting hearts. Hearts is a sign of love. And do you love hearts? Oh, you're going to lay down on my hearts. That wasn't quite what I had in mind. Yes, I love you too, kitty. That is very sweet of you. Come over here. Come on, come over here. There we go. There we go. Alright. And just as a comparison to show you, if I try to do this Phoenix Rose, which is the top left rose here, and we'll do that over here. I mean, it might be more pink, but it's also a bit more purple. I have to keep stopping because the cat keeps nuzzling the end of my brush. Which, you know, is an ultimate sign of love, right? Shouldn't one want love out of their cat. Alright, she's gone off to play with her brother. And I'm sort of painting within the lines, but you could also say that love is about going outside the lines and doing anything wild and free, so you could just add some little marks in the out, and that could be a style. Okay, your hearts are your own, and they could be any way that you want them to be. Alright, so that was the Royal Langdon Rose. This over here is the Phoenix Rose here. We'll do this one in the Phoenix Rose. And you can see that it's close to the Royal Langdon Rose. It is not exactly the same. Each company interprets a color in their own way. So even two paints that have the same name aren't going to be exactly the same. They're both roses. They're both in the rose family, but they are slightly different in how they are portrayed. I'm still really liking that permanent pink one. That's a very lovely color. Alright, but now we're on the Winsor Newton Rose Madder Hue. We'll do this for the big one. But I think none of these are what I had in my brain in terms of making a very hot pink. So as funny as this may be, I think that I may have to go to one of my pan colors because I've got some pans of pearlescent paints, and one of those is nice bright pink, we'll call it. Yeah, see, that's also not the kind of bright hot pink that I had in mind, or a children's book kind of pink. So these are all lovely pinks. They're all pretty shades in their own right, but it's not what I was imagining in my head for this fish that I want to paint. So it shows that when you are painting, you generally can have something in mind that you're trying to portray, and you just keep at it. And if it's a particular color, then you try different colors. Now this one is actually trying to be reasonably close to what I was after. Alright, so let's play with that one some more after we finish putting this in. I'm just putting in some shading over there. And it could be at different times that the heart is different things. If you're feeling really sad, you might draw dark black hearts showing how sad you feel. And when you're happy, you might draw bright bubbly hearts. But that's part of what Dine was showing us, is the power of the heart and how it's a pretty universal symbol, at least in this point in our society. Most people look at a heart and think that it has something to do with romantic feelings, whether we are feeling happy about them or feeling sad about them or so on. Up. Jim Dine. So Jim Dine was born in 1935. He studied poetry and got a Bachelor's of Fine Arts. So he's done, he's done all sorts of different kinds of hearts, in silver and multicolors, yellows, pinks. He actually has one of the sort of kind of pink that I'm interested in. He's done them in quilted patterns. So if you take a look for Jim Dine, you can see just a sampling of all the different kinds of ways that you can portray a heart. Let's try this Phoenix Rose again, and let's try doing it lighter even. Part of the beauty of watercolor is that you can control how much water you use and the way that you use the brush. It still might be a little, well, let's see how it dries. Watercolor paints dry lighter than they appear when you first put them down. And a lot of watercolor painting is about putting down layers. So you put down something, you let it dry, then you add another layer, maybe with some gentle shading on it, and then you let it dry. And let's try this little one over here with what's left on the brush, which should be even lighter still. I think that might be reasonably good what I'm after. You know, I could go up and grab the pan of watercolor, but I'd rather not make this more complicated than I need to by having pans out and tubes out. Jeez, sorry. And all that sort of stuff. But I think that you should be able to see that this one's a little darker, that one's a little lighter, and that one's a little lighter still as I use more and more water, the exact same paint that's coming out of there, which is a Phoenix Rose. Phoenix is just the manufacturer of the watercolor tube kit. I think that one comes from Job Lot, so it's a fairly inexpensive one. Although you can get it from, Amazon and all the other Michaels and those kinds of places in general. But yeah, see how that comes out even a lighter color than that one by using more water and less pigment when you're doing this. Alright, so let's say that we're doing hearts and a fish theme. So what if, hello kitten, I don't want you nuzzling the cable because it's all connected to the camera. Remember, that's why we put this up on the clamp, so that the cat would not be needing, no. So if we drew a fish, and she likes spikes on her fish, we'll put some spikes in there. Spikes down there. And then we'll put a heart inside the fish. And a tail. And big eye. Let's say we drew something like that. These are just rough general ideas here. We're just playing. Alright, so let's go with this. Actually, let's go with the permanent pink, which was this one here, as the center heart color. Since I like that one a lot. Alright, so now we've got a heart in the fish. Now if I try to paint the fish itself right now, then the pink from that heart that I just made would probably bleed out into the pink of the surrounding fish. So instead I'm going to paint the little spikes. And I happen to have some gold left here on my palette from before. So I will make some gold spikes. Again, that's the beauty of watercolors, is that although the paint dries, it does not go bad. You just come back and re-wet it and use it again. So it is great for frugal people because you never really waste paint. Any paint that's left over, like these little dabs of gold I didn't use last time, I'll just use them now. And this gold is just so pretty. It's nice and shimmery. So this was an artist's loft gold. I don't know if you can see its shimmery color there. We're just playing with ideas. The more that you paint things and try things, the more you see what appeals to you and what you want to try differently. Because your painting is all about your vision. It's not about how anyone else sees the world. And I suppose in this particular case, I'm trying to bring to life my niece's vision, that she likes spiky fish. So I might myself not normally draw fish in this manner, but I am trying to draw fish in the way that makes her happy. So there we go, spiky fish. So something else to think about, because now I have to let the gold dry and the heart dry before I paint the rest of that pink. Let's draw another heart. Part of what you would consider doing them with pencil first is that if you did something that you wanted to change, it's easy to change pencil. I wouldn't use this eraser in the top of the pencil because those erasers tend to be awful, but better erasers are very inexpensive, and it's really good to have one. They last a long, long, long time, so spend a little money for one that lasts a really long time, and then it makes all of your drawing so much easier. Waterproof pen. So something else to think about is, up until now we've just been drawing open hearts, which is, you know, again what Jim Dine was doing, so that's part of what we were doing for inspiration for him, but he also did do things with different patterns and so on. So let's say that we wanted to do some doodling in there. One style of doodling is the Zentangle, which is where they fill in different parts of your image with different types of shapes. And that came right from the Blackstone Valley region too, so it's another local art style. So we can just make random sections out of this, whatever appeals to you. And then in each section, do some little sort of shapes. So we do fish scales if you want. We could do little cross hatches. Do circles. You could do wavy swirls. Whatever you want. What will we put this as? Well, I'll put that. Right, so now we've got different sections of the heart. Give that a moment to dry. You might not think of ink as being wet, but the way it gets out of the tube is that it's wet. So it's good to give it even just a moment to dry. And again, it doesn't matter that you use my particular one. Although if you're curious, I'm using a Jelly Roll 06 from Sakura. But the important part is that it's waterproof, so that when we do watery things to it now, the ink does not run and become a black mess. So now, I'm just painting this with water right now. It's still a little wet. That's alright. Right, so we're going to use kittens. Relax. We're going to do different shades of pink for different sections of this. So quilting is an American tradition, and people quilted because they just had little scraps of fabric left over from making clothing or bedding or so on, and they wouldn't want to put those fabrics to waste, so they would connect the little bits of fabric together to make a bed covering out of it. And you could honor that with your heart to show that love is often little connections of memories and events which then forge together to form an overall feeling. Or maybe for you it could be showing that your family is a group of different types of people that have all been brought together and that have all found a way to make it work. There's all sorts of different ways that you can represent love and compassion. And it can even be used for a community. That you can say that our community has different people with different beliefs from different backgrounds, and together we all come together and have compassion for each other. So creating a heart out of different kinds of colors, see I'm using different shades of pink in here, is one way to show that. So think about how you would show that. What is important to you? So I'm just on a pink theme here, so I happen to be showing that with shades of pink, but I mean you don't have to use pink, of course. And I just had some of the pink from the center area bleed out into this area, but maybe that's fine too. Maybe that shows that love isn't neat and ordered, that love has everything affecting everything else that's near it. So what if you showed that with two hearts? just do it with pen instead of doing the pencil step. So what if we had two hearts here? What if we made them wholly different types of hearts? So we'll make this one a tall, skinny heart. Wanted them to cross over more. Hearts will do what they will do. Alright, well that's alright. Alright, so we got two hearts now. And let's use two of these new colors. So we'll use this one over here on the left, or the right, the other left. The other left, which most people call the right. So we are taking inspiration from Jim Dine, and we are putting our own spin on it. And that is the beauty of art, is that you can look at different art styles and see what different artists have done and say, alright, well, how would I have done that differently? If I think about hearts, what do they end up meaning to me? Do I like doing them in pink, or do I like doing them in purple or blue or black? Do I like having a steampunk kind of feel to them? We are all different. Alright, I think I will let that dry so that when I do the second one it doesn't bleed into the first one, but it just sort of overlaps on that section there. Let's see, I think this is dry. Yep, so it might be safe to do that one. So with that one, I was going to try to do this Phoenix Rose in a light style. Alright, that might be light enough. Just want to make that fairly light, because when it's lighter it seems to lose some of that purpley feel to it. And get more towards the pink feel, which is what I'm after. We'll find out. And the more that you practice with your paints and try them in different ways, the more that you figure those kinds of things out. Does a color look one way when it's heavy and another way when you put it on very light? And maybe it looks one way on a different kind of paper, because different papers react with the paint in different manners. And then always keep in mind that the way that it looks at first when you're putting it on wet is going to be different than the way that it will look when it dries. Right, so make it lighter at the top of the fish, which is where the sun is hitting it, and then a bit darker down at the bottom of the fish, which is where it tends to be more in shadow. That's what it's looking like. It's still a little purple though. I don't really want it to be a purpley fish. But you know, a lot of these shades are pretty subtle about exactly where it tends to sway in one direction or another. I think this one might be dry-ish, still a little wet. We'll give it a shot. So this is still the exact same color, still the same Phoenix Rose. It was just on my brush still after painting the fish. It also goes to show that watercolor paint lasts a long time. So you can paint a fair amount with the exact same brush before you run out of pigment. So the place where they cross becomes a new shade of pink. Alright, I think I'm becoming fonder of this Phoenix Rose. And maybe I'll go with Phoenix Rose for the pink. But you sort of lose the pinkishness of it when you put this giant red heart in there. Now the color's more about that red heart rather than the pink of the fish. So I had almost thought that maybe I'll start making a fish with a heart in it, but I don't know. I think that that then overwhelms the fish and becomes too much about the heart and less about the pink fish. So I'll have to ponder that a little more. The cat is coming back. Just say hello again. Oh, kitty, that now got watercolor paints in it. You want to go over this way? Yep, you can go back in there. That's fine. No, you don't want to stay back in there, sweetie. Oh, that's got watercolor paint. Hey, hey. I said, oh. Good kitten. Alright. What else can we do with hearts? So up until now we've been painting everything wet on dry, which means we have a wet brush and we have the paper dry. But if we make the paper wet, so I'm cleaning my brush so it just has water in it, and I'm just putting water in here, which is clear. So we have clear water and nothing else. And now we take a little bit of this permanent pink. Just put a drop. You see how that spreads and billows out? So you can create all sorts of neat effects by having wet areas. And now, so I'm making the brush completely clean again, so it's just got water in it. Now if you have a brush, now you can just sort of use it as a drag tool. So I'm not painting at this point. I'm just dragging the existing paint out into the water, and you can see how it sort of spreads and blossoms and does what it wants to do. It will generally stay in the area that's wet, so it's like its own little world. So I'm just dragging the paint around. You see how it has this sort of blossom effect in the center, which was created by the way the paint naturally filled out into the water. Now this is going to take a fair amount of time to dry, because that's like a bubble of water in there. But you can see that's a interesting, pretty effect, which is different from when I was just painting on dry paper. Let's try that again. And we've got a nice heart there. Let's see if I can do this whole heart partly on another heart. Alright. So once again, I'm going to use a clean, just wet brush. So even though my brush is wet and I'm going over this other section here that was already painted, it's going to make a layer on top of that other one. I could really scrub at it and try to get the water to reactivate that paint and move it around and such, but in this case I'm just trying to put another layer on top of it, so I'm not putting a lot of pressure on that area. Alright, so let's try this same pink, the permanent pink. So I'm just going to, got some paint on my brush, and I'm just going to tap in the middle of the wet area. And you see how that's spread out? And I mean, I could just leave it like that if I wanted to. Or I could let it just keep spreading on its own. Let's let it keep spreading on its own and see what it does. Different paints work in different ways in that sense. Here we will, since we still got paint on the brush, we will paint one without any ink at all. I tend to like the look of ink with the black edges, but you know, there's a lot of watercolor painters who just paint with the watercolors, no lines at all, and that creates its own look. So you can do that. And if we did heart on top of another heart. So that gives a different kind of look than if you have the hearts have the inks to give them edges. Right, so now I'm trying to drag the color out a little, and this is already drying. This shows how quickly water can dry depending on how humid it is in your house. So this is still a tiny bit wet, but mostly it is pretty dry at this point. So, or if I had done this when it was wet, I'd be able to drag that color around. Now it is pretty resistant and is just staying where it's going, which is pretty. We're just trying different techniques here. Let's take a look at this Spaightwood Gallery. Let's see what they've got for Jim Dine. Well, he does some things with two hearts side by side. Now, interestingly, when he does them, here we'll just do it without the ink because he tends to do it very loose. So he'll do something like this, where we'll use this color, where he'll do two hearts side by side, and he'll do one in one color. This is a permanent pink. And then next he'll do another one in a different color. And then he'll use that heart's color to create, a box around the first heart. Song about a man in a box, and now that is stuck in my head about I'm the heart in the box. Well, Jim Dine really liked this idea of putting hearts in boxes in their opposing colors, because now we'll put this heart into a box made out of a color of the first heart. And I would have to imagine that he's showing that hearts are different, but that they get wrapped up in each other and they become complements of each other and so on. But I don't like, for myself, the symbolism of the boxes, that these hearts are in boxes from each other. I suppose I prefer the symbolism where they are connecting to each other rather than separate from each other. But that's how we all see these things differently. Some people may love the symbolism of them being side by side and being surrounded by each other and so on. So part of this is that you can play with the style and say, I really like the way that makes me feel, or I'm not really keen on the way that makes me feel, and try different things and see what appeals to you. So one of the things he did is have a grid put a heart in there. And this could maybe, if you're a quilter, you know someone who's a quilter, you might like something like this, where you put in a heart of whatever color appeals to you. So we'll put this color a heart. And then you could fill in that grid with whatever colors make you happy. So let's say you're Irish. You put in some greens and oranges and whites to represent the Irish flag. Thing is just to be careful when you're painting too near the pink, which is wet, because you wouldn't necessarily want the green to go blending in to the pink. That's the green. Let that dry for a second. And put in some of the orange, and then we'll just leave some of the cubes white to represent the white. Be careful near the pink. There we go. I think you get the sense. If you're putting it against the grid, then you could put whatever colors you want to in the grid to represent whatever it is you want to represent. Something could represent a flag, or you could represent family colors, or the favorite colors of the people involved, all sorts of things. And that's the beauty of symbolism, is that the symbols can mean whatever you personally want them to mean. And that's part of the fun of artwork, because it could be that Jim Dine meant a particular thing with his paintings, and that someone else who's looking at it thinks something completely different. They get a completely different impression from their interpretation of it. One of his paintings is called A Heart at the Opera, and it has a pink heart. And I suppose here we are talking about pink. sort of like that kind of a pink heart. And it's got a saw underneath it. And what does that mean? Someone's going to saw your heart open? Does that mean I make my heart vulnerable to you? All sorts of different ways to interpret a heart with a saw. So have fun drawing your hearts in whatever way appeals to you. Let me know if you have any questions at all about using watercolors or using pen and ink, and add any comments below about what you'd like to see us do in the future. Have a great afternoon.